We are live. Okay, saying we've been live for 1 minute 47, so everyone might have heard about my nakedness without the hat. Let's see who notices.
Yeah.
So, what you dramming tonight?
It was a taps off kind of day today, so hats off as well. So I've decided, since we've got a local historian and whisky legend in our midst tonight, I'm going to go for the Lost Loch Distillery Jericho.
Jericho, nice.
This is a step up. The basic bottle that you get is 43%. It's a 46 or so. I've just cracked this open tonight to see. So as you know, the distillery up at what was called Benihee latterly, wasn't it? 1822 to 1913, and it's no longer. It's just basically cow sheds now. I think.
Cow sheds, yeah.
Very difficult to ascertain where the distillery might have been. But yeah, there's no Sir Heeds in Benihee, so I thought I'll have this, and I won't have a hangover tomorrow. We'll see.
Unlike me in the gin last night.
Well, indeed.
I don't know what I'm going to have.
I was a bit worried when I got a text. I got your text saying, "Have you got any Pepsi?" I thought, "Oh God, what's happening?"
It was all right. Yeah, watching the football, and then it went to extra time, and then 20 odd penalties, of course. So we've got to stay up and have a dram with that.
5 million penalties, yeah.
And then you stay online and you wind up the Man United fans as well a wee bit after that.
Yeah, I'm sure you were celebrating a wee bit.
So, good evening, Duncan. Good evening, David. I hope you've got your glasses charged. I don't know what I'm going to have tonight. I've really just sat down. We've got the in-laws, the wife's brother's coming up to visit with the family, so they're arriving tonight. So we've been kind of getting the house ready for them. And you've a higher bar with the Jericho, so yeah. Oh me! I'll tell you what I've got snuck in the corner here. Here's a nice one. Here's a 2015.
Oh, nice! The original revival.
Yeah.
The Billy Walker revival.
Let's try that one. The combination of cast, the PX and the Oloroso.
Oh, so that's Rachel's one then.
It's no. It's yeah. Sorry, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It was only Oloroso, but it was Billy, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Yeah. So that is the newer, the different dram. So folks, good evening. We've got David and Duncan in here with us. So let's get started. We're going to introduce Ian MacIlwain. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who is a local historian, author, photographer, and he's joined us tonight to share some of his experience for his. We'll focus on all the books because he does quite a range of books from whiskey to food and travel and things. So we'll bring Ian in and let's see what he has to say. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening. Hello, Mike.
Hi.
How are you?
Speaking to you from my phone, which is less than satisfactory, but never mind. It'll just have to do.
Yeah, that's a good.
These weird days,
pre-warned you.
We have to make the best of what we can.
This will be the first instalment, Ian. I'm sure we'll have you back. There's the stories you'll be telling us today. We'll need to continue.
I'd hope to be able to show you things from my screen, but I can't do that because there's no connection. So unless you use Zoom or something else, I can't do it. So never mind. We'll just have to make the best of it. Yeah.
We'll plan for the next one, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
I mean, we can hear you, okay?
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Guys, if you're watching, can you just give a wee indication that you can all hear and see Ian all right at your end? So Ian, how did it all start for you in the publish? Because you're self-publicist, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Broombank. Yeah.
Do you want me? How much time do we have tonight, Mike? So I know whether to myself.
Generally about an hour. We have been known to go over. So
I said when Mike put it up on Facebook, we are not going to have enough time for an hour. But as I said earlier on, this will be the first instalment, Ian.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what happened is I was approaching retirement in 2004, and I'd been a photographer all my life, and I thought I want to do something with photography when I retire. And I held an exhibition of photographs in Cornhill Canteen. And I sold all the pictures to my absolute amazement. And I then held another exhibition and sold all those pictures as well. And somebody who'd seen the pictures, who was married to one of my trainees at the time, because I was a psychiatrist, that's why Russell knows me. A man who was married to a trainee was one of the directors of an outfit called ABBA-Med, which is still there. It provides medical services to all sorts of companies in the oil industry and linked with the oil industry. And he said, we've got a 3-floor building on Carbon Place. Would you like to shoot pictures of all the people that we do business with and put them into our block? And I thought, what an opportunity. It's fantastic. So I started off with helicopter services, with air sea rescue, with people putting out fires at sea. I moved on to all sorts of industrially linked businesses. They winched me out to a rig in the Murray Firth. I spent a day wandering around on the rig and taking pictures from down the leg of the rig and all sorts of things. It was very interesting. Mm-hmm. And at the bottom of the list was a group of distilleries called Inverurie. Never heard of them. And he said, go out to the nearest one, which is Knockdhu, between Huntley and Macduff, and talk to Malcolm Waring, who's the manager in Knockdhu, and he'll show you what they do and what they're about. And it's just one of those situations where I went in and I immediately hit it off with Malcolm. It's like we'd known each other for years. And he said, I'll show you stuff in here that you'd never believe existed. I won't show you what the tourists see or what the workforce see. I'll show you all the stuff that's underground. That's the old bits of equipment we don't use anymore, or the hidden bits. And I was just captivated by this. It seemed extraordinary. And he said, you know what you need to do? He said, when I put a lot of my original impetus down to Malcolm, who's now the manager of Pulteney and Wick. And he said, well, when we go out as a group of managers, we always talk about what the old guys say. All the tales from the old guys is what really holds us together. And we love that. It gets people going. And he said, you know what you should do? You should go around collecting the stories from the old men. And he said, you wouldn't have a problem because you understand, Dorrit, you've been here long enough. And he said, if you want to come back next week, I'll find you 3 old retired guys to talk to. So I bought myself a recording. It was microdisc at the time. It was a very good quality recording apparatus. And took it out there. And my God, he was right. It was amazing. I mean, the stories just poured out of these 3 guys. I could have been there, I could have been there all day, actually. It was extraordinary. I took lots of pictures. And at that time, I just thought, this is fantastic. I must do more of this. And I started approaching distilleries and asking if I could come and look for parts of them that nobody bothers to photograph. My criteria is that it has to be built before 1960. And there have to be a lot of cobwebs. If there are no cobwebs, I'm not interested. So various places got dismissed. Auchentoshan was dismissed. You could eat your lunch off the floor in Auchentoshan. Glenmorangie was dismissed. There are a whole lot that are far too clean. Glenfiddich was too clean. I want places that are have got the history on their sleeve. And I started to look, partly inspired by Alfred Bernard's tour around the distilleries in 1880. I thought, I'm going to go and look for some really old ones. I was just listening to you talking about Jericho. I mean, that's one of the ones I went to look for. And it's there are actually some bits of Jericho's distillery left. There are some malt barrels left, which are used for storing reeds, because the woman who owns the farmer's wife makes reed baskets, and he collects boats and puts them in another warehouse. So there are some buildings left, but the kiln isn't there. There's nothing significant there. But I started to find other ones that I could look at, and I couldn't tell you which I saw first, but one of the first ones was Ardmore.
Yeah.
Kennethman. And I went into Ardmore and instantly hit it off with with God, his name's got out of my head now. That's great, isn't it? That's good. Alistair Longwell.
Alistair, yeah.
Who's now the regional manager for Allied. But at that point was the distillery manager. And he let me, again, shoot all sorts of things, amazing things. I was just absolutely captivated by the cooperage, for instance, which looked like it had been left from a film set. I mean, everything was just scattered about.
I've lost sound.
Yeah, sorry, Ian, we've just lost a wee bit of sound from you there. Let's have a look. So
it was a little bit crackly before.
Back.
If you can't hear me, I'm going to go into the house because there's no great advantage of speaking to you out here. I was going to show you things, but I can't do that anyway. So I've got a much better connection in the house.
This is, like I said, this is part one. This is the introduction to you. This one.
We can hear you. We can hear you a bit better now again. If you want to pop to the house, give us a shout when you're back. We will. Right, guys, we're just going to get a better connection from Ian as he moves into the house. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Jericho because it was an interesting one, wasn't it? The Benahee malt, or it was known as in between, but they spelled it with only one end, didn't they? It was Benahee with one end, which is not the way we spell it now. It's quite
everything was taken by horse and cart to the train station at Inch. And I think that was, I mean, it sounds ridiculous that it would be too expensive, but it ended up being far, far too expensive. And they just were making no money whatsoever, but they had a fantastic malt. I mean, it was revered. And there was a story of somebody, there's some legend that there's a barrel or a cask of it sitting somewhere in the northeast of Scotland. I would imagine if it was, it's probably been drunk by now, but I like to think of it as one of these elusive holy grails that's lying somewhere in the northeast. Yeah.
And called Jericho because of the Jordan burn that runs off Benahee. And the distiller was a pastor as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
There was certainly a very religious link. So he named the distillery Jericho because he got the water from the Jordan. So a nice wee link there. So we've got the whiskey minister in tonight. We've got Vic watching. So there's a story that'll warm the heart, Vic. A pastor making whiskey. There you go. You don't hear that very often. So Ian's actually dropped out. So hopefully he's going to get a better connection and come back on from us. So
hello to Walter, another one of our technophobes who's managed to get in. Walter doesn't have social media, but he uses Diane as his wife, his good ladies. So Walter's joined. Walter was a psychiatrist as well, and a colleague of myself and Ian when we were all working away at the hospital at Royal Cornhill. So we're all now whiskey aficionados. We've moved on.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we'll let Ian know. So Ian is back. How are you?
Right, sorry about that.
Excellent. We can hear you much better now.
That's much better. Yeah, fantastic.
I'm competing with far too many people who are trying to work from home, and they're all using Zoom and God knows what else, and it just becomes impossible. So,
absolutely, anyway. Yeah. Well, we're just saying, Ian, one of your former colleagues, Walter Forbes, is in watching tonight. So if you want to say hello.
Oh, that's nice. Hello, Walter. Anyway, where did I get to? Not wandering around Knockdo, wandering around Ardmore, all these things. And very gradually, over 5 years, I went into 55 distilleries. Now, the biggest problem with this was getting in. The photography is the easy bit. The access is very, very difficult. And the bigger the company, the more difficult it becomes. So Diageo is a nightmare. And you actually have to go higher and higher up the chain with Diageo until you get to somebody who's high enough up to give you permission. Nobody down at the shop floor will let you do anything at all. And each distillery, they've got 29 distilleries, probably more now. Each distillery, you have to get permission individually for each one. So you can't get a block, it was really, really irritating. And anyway, over this 5 years, I accumulated a portfolio of pictures. and a lot of recordings of conversations with old men. And I started to hawk this folio around all over the place and show people the pictures. And in France, there's a very famous photography festival in Arles in Provence. And I took the pictures down there where you can get what's referred to as a portfolio review. And I went in front of a whole load of people. Really, these are very important people in the world of photography. The editor of European Vogue, for instance, or Spanish photographers' main agent, people who are involved in the processing of images and production of books and things like that. And they were amazing, actually. They were so negative. Just the Spanish one said, "Oh, well, there's no people in these pictures. You have to go back and shoot them all again. This is no good. I like people." And I said, "Well, it's not supposed to be about people. It's a sort of still life. It's not people."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, well, it's no good. No good." And the last guy in the list of 5 was the editor of American Photo, which is USA's biggest photography magazine. And I thought, well, what the hell? We'll try the last one. And he just flipped his way through the pictures and he said, "Who's your publisher?" I said, "I don't have a publisher." He said, "You don't have a publisher?" He said, "Who's your editor?" "Don't have an editor." "You don't have an editor?"
It's like a scene from Monty Python.
"You don't have an agent? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" He said, "I could find you 3 publishers who'd produce this next week if you want, in the States." And I was so astounded by this reaction that I came out and I thought, what? There's obviously depends very much who's looking at it, but some people are going to see something really interesting in this. And very fortunately, there was a big photography festival in Birmingham not long afterwards. And I went there and I went to listen to some people that I'd done some training with. And the last person to talk was a book publisher who prints all these landscape photographers' works and designs them. And he said, anybody who's got an interesting project in their heads can come round and talk to me. And I thought, oh, yeah, right, I've heard that before. And there'll be a line about 100 yards waiting to see him. And he was all on his own on a stool. And I went up and I showed him the pictures. And he said, "I just love these. I'll turn them into a book for you. We'll make a book together. We'll do it." He said, "You'll have to pay for it." So at that stage, I didn't know what kind of costs were involved, but I invested an amazing sum of money in this. I mean, it was the same as buying a sports car, really. 3,000 copies, coffee table book. And my wife thought I was completely crazy because she thought I'd never sell 3,000 in a million years. You know, I thought it was far too ambitious.
And this was bottled history, yeah?
You know, there's only 2 things that Scottish men are interested in. One's golf and the other's whiskey. And so I've got a captive audience for the whiskey, and a lot of them are obsessed with whiskey enough that they really like to read about it and they like to buy books about it and things like that. So I thought, I am going to sell these. It may take me some time. It has taken me some time, but it's been, somebody said to me, in fact, it was the original publisher who said to me, "Don't think of this as a way of making money. Think of it as an extremely expensive visiting card." And that was absolutely right.
So this was bottled history. Yes,
came off the back of it.
This was bottled history. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's it's a brilliant read. I mean, there's some fantastic little stories. I love the one about the guy who came out of retirement to work in a distillery and enthusiastically switched on the rakes for the mash tun, not only to realise that the guys who'd cleaned it were still in there and were running away from the rake.
Right, chasing them round and round. Yeah. I mean, I had to edit the stories because there are quite a lot that are either too filthy or too difficult to print. But it was very funny. And I was in the middle with an interview with a former stillman from Wick, and his wife put her head round the door and said, "You don't want to listen to all this rubbish he's telling you." She said, "You want to know what it's like being married to somebody like this for years and years. who's always drunk when he comes home, and sometimes he can only get home by holding on to the telegraph poles. It's a bloody nightmare.
I heard a story. When I was at Springbank by Frank McCarthy. I'm not sure if you've come across him, but
Indeed,
the chap was the same kind of story. And he always got home, sat down, and fell asleep straight away. And the wife actually phoned the distillery to complain that they were working him too hard, because when he got home, all he did was sleep. So but what it was the drams that they were getting at the distillery.
Yeah, cool.
was what was making him drunk. He wasn't tired. He was bleeding drunk.
I mean, do you know about these drams? I mean, the drams are not the kind of drams we might drink.
No, it was clearing.
Oh,
just
I mean,
clearing.
we're talking about half a pint sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's proof spirit they're drinking. It's cleric. It's not matured spirit.
Yeah.
So it's just extraordinary. And they drink. I mean, the worst ones drink the wort. I mean, the straight out the mash tun, straight out the washbacks, and dip a vessel in there and drink it straight. I mean, it's horrendous stuff, full of yeast and God knows what else. But you have to be pretty far gone to get onto the wort. But anyway, there we are.
A lot of these guys were literally alcoholic. They were reliant on it, weren't they?
Oh, totally. Although I must say I met quite a lot of people who've been drinking extremely heavily all their lives and were definitely not alcoholic. So, just because you are exposed to a huge amount of it does not necessarily mean that you will become dependent on it.
Physically dependent. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that amazed me about the whole industry is how friendly it was. I mean, it was extraordinary. I thought they were doing me a favour, but in their eyes, I was doing them a favour. So I often came out with bottles under each arm, So I've got a collection of interesting bottles from this project, which were given to me in generosity by all sorts of people. And people, I went to Boonahaven. John McClellan was the manager. I don't know where he is now. And he said, I want you to have something really special from us. So I'm going to get you, I've got a bottle of 45-year-old in a cupboard. So I'm going to give you a decent dram of that. So you get this kind of stuff, which just amazed me. So after that project was finished, I thought, right, I've got an idea in my head here. And I went back to Ardmore and I said to Alistair Longwell, how would you like me to shoot a portrait of your distillery? To just take a time capsule and do it like now, 2011, and photograph everything you do and all the people that do it. And he said, that's a brilliant idea. And I said, it would cost you probably about £3,000 for you'll have 1,000 copies for £3,000. In the end, they bought 2,000 copies for a bit more, 5,000 or something like that. He said, I've got that kind of money in my petty cash. There's no problem. And I thought, lucky you. So it was a very different project. It was not in any sense a historical project. I was trying to capture the essence of what a working distillery was like. And they were, again, the workforce were amazingly helpful, friendly, and I shot it in various seasons. It was in the middle of the winter, so I shot it with snow on it, all sorts of things. And I had this idea in my head at that point that this little book, Russell's probably got a copy of that as well, have you?
I'm sure you'll hear.
Yeah.
I'm the ultimate fan club. I got a row from Ian because Ian and I have known each other for years. But I never assumed that I'd just ask for a copy. So he'd already given me a copy of the bottle history, very kind of him to do so. But I saw the Ardmore one just online on Amazon, I think it was.
Yeah.
It didn't dawn to me that when I bought it, it went straight to Broombank. So of course the book arrived with a note inside it saying, "For Christ's sake, Russell, you just had to ask." And the 10 hours back inside the book, it was like, you're not.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm like, oh shit, okay, sorry.
Did he sign the books, Russell? That's the key. Did he sign them?
Yeah. I've got my book signed. Yeah, the bottle history signed. Yeah, absolutely. But we can enjoy this over a dram. So we're just beginning to fulfill that. So yeah.
And Ian, can we still get these books?
Sorry?
Can we still get these books? Are they still available?
Oh yeah. If you go to broombankpublishing.com, you'll see the eight books that I've self-published, and with a description, and you can buy them on the website. So it's been a very good. I got a website designed for me 6 months ago to make it easier for people to buy, and it should work perfectly.
While you pour your dram, we need to ask you what you're away to pour there. But you were also involved in this project as well, weren't you? With
yeah, absolutely, Glenn Glassock.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about Glassock is that it's such an ugly duckling.
Yes.
I'd always loved the whiskey. I remember reading a review of the whiskey from way back 1985. Oh, you're bringing it. No, you don't have to bring it all in.
Hi, Maggie.
Hello. I'll leave you to it.
How are you?
The waitress has brought in various assorted bottles which I had outside.
Oh, wonderful! What's a fantastic waitress, that like.
That's what you need, isn't it? I'm trying to get mine myself.
I'm particularly taken with this glass of Pedro Jimenez finish.
Oh yes, yeah, it's lovely.
Which I think I got from you, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's really lovely. And it's probably the most like. I mean, I've got various. I don't know if she's brought the other ones in. I've got a whole load of these, which are. That's the MacPhail's collection, 1986.
Oh wow!
Glassock, and it's a love. The description is linen and grass mowings, and it's quite a distinctive flavour that Glassock has. And
yeah,
I bought a bottle from you a couple of weeks ago, Russell. You sold it to me probably less than a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Which is the one that Rachel Barry did in little casks.
Oh, the octaves. Yes.
The trouble with that is it's a nice whiskey, but the Glassock flavour is completely masked by the casks. The casks are so powerful that you can't actually really taste the Glassock behind them at all. Whereas this Pedro Jimenez is, you can taste. It tastes like the 1985 one, very similar to it, and I like it much better actually.
Yeah. I do like that. Is one of the best finishes I think we have in the shop is that Glenglassaugh Pedro Jimenez. It was absolutely lovely, and it just shows a lot of people go on about sherry bombs. And I actually was on the Sherry Bomb Facebook group the other day saying, just because it's sherry, it doesn't have to be a bomb. It can be nicely sherried, it can be subtly sherried.
Well, absolutely. The Glencadam Andalusia is a case in point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just very subtle and beautifully sherried, yeah.
Oh, nice wee teardrops.
Look at that.
When I did the project for Glassock, at the beginning I didn't know it was Russian money that was paying it, but it was. And they said, we want you to record the reconstruction of this distillery over a 6 months to a year. And you can do it in any way that you wish. The brief is that you just make a record of what it was like before and what it was like at the end. And I thought, what a wonderful project. And I went up there once a week for 6 months. And I actually marked on the floor of the warehouses and all over the distillery, I left duct tape on the floor in X's made with duct tape. And so every time I went up there, I put the tripod on the X and took the same shot as the week before. So I could see it like a slow motion change over a 6 month period. And it was really fascinating, quite extraordinary. And they paid me very respectably for it, so that was a bonus. Nice project to do, definitely. And I like the whiskey. And the guys that Graham Ewanson, who's now manager in what is it, Tormore? Is it Tormore, the one that's down from Dalwhinnie, the one towards Inverness and Dalwhinnie?
No, Tamdhu, is it?
Sorry?
Is he not Tamdhu, no?
Tormore's the one with the big white buildings you pass by. It's got all those.
Oh no, it's not Tormore then, no. Which is the one you go past Dalwhinnie and you're going from towards Inverness down the hill.
Tomatel?
No, on the A9.
Tomatin.
It's, yeah, I think that was the first one I said. Yeah.
It's owned by Santori, I think.
They've got Japanese owners, but they're by and large independent. Tomatin.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. They're left to their own kind of devices. And we actually had a chat with Scott Adamson not too long ago about the Shoshu, the Japanese casks. He said they had to buy them full price off their own, off the owners were the same people producing the Shoshu, and they had to buy the cask. They weren't given the cask; they had to buy full price, which was.
This was for the Kubokin, the peated range that they do at the end of every year. Before their deep clean, they do a peated run, and they call it Kubokin, which is ghost dog. And there's some story about a ghost dog up in the moor where Tomatin Distillery is. He wanted to finish some or use Shoshu barrels which were owned by the Japanese company, and he thought he would just get them. So they said, we can give you them, and they sent over the bill, and it was full price. It was a huge amount of money. Got to buy these off my own company.
So I've moved on to the 15-year-old, one of our other Aberdeenshires, the 15-year-old Glengarry is what I've moved on to now. Cask strength.
What's in your glass, Ian?
I'll tell you something about my introduction to malt whiskey. When I was 13, 14, my dad used to get a bottle every Christmas from my cousin, who was the excise officer for Auchentoshan. And this was a triple distilled cask strength, part of the allowance that he was given every year. Now, there's a whole long story, a backstory to this, but which I will not go into. But anyway, this was my first taste of proper malt whiskey, and I never forgot what it tasted like. And when I got to Aberdeen first, my father had met a GP from Aberdeenshire on one of his. He was a GP as well in Hampshire. And he'd met an Aberdeenshire GP on one of his refresher courses, and she came from Old Meldrum. And he said, "Go out there, and you can have supper with her, and she'll do a blether with you." And it's funny because my wife knew her as well for completely different reasons. She had a reputation for looking after Staffordshire Bull Terriers, rescue Staffordshire Bull Terriers. But she was a feisty old bat. She was an amazing woman. And she, the first thing I did when I got there was she said, "Come on, have a dram." I said, "Oh, what's this then?" She said, "This is Glengarry. It's just down the road." And I don't know if you've ever tasted a pre-1970, a pre-1975 Glengarry.
I haven't.
I mean, we're talking about a completely different animal from what you get now. It's probably the closest thing would be a rather slightly peatier expression of Ardmore. So it had a very strong peat component, and it was just a lovely whiskey. Now, something disastrous happened in the mid-80s, which I can tell you about if you want. It's in the, I don't know whether this is private or not, but anyway, in the 90s,
you're not under contract, Ian. You can say what you want.
Oh, exactly. I went down to London to visit some friends, and in the airport, I thought, I'll buy something. I'll buy a malt and take them a malt. So I bought some Glengarry, and I thought it was really good value. And I got there, and they said, let's have a dram. And I thought, my God, I'd never tasted anything like this. It tastes like perfume. It doesn't taste anything like the Glengarry that I thought I was buying for them. And in the industry, this is known as the perfume problem. And any bottling between about 1978 and 88 tastes of perfume. Why? Have I told you this before?
I don't think so.
No.
You may well have mentioned it on the Ardmore night, but I've got very little memory of that night. So.
Do you know? Yes, with good reason. Do you know how they used to stop the stills boiling over?
Oh yes, yes. They used to put soap. Yeah.
Soap powder, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They had in the glory hole Ardmore. They had a soap shredder, and the soap was made of brass, and it was on the side of the still, on the spirit still. And if there was danger, then an inexperienced stillman could easily get to a point where the thing was going to boil over. I mean, you were talking about direct firing. There was nothing controllable about it. It was a tremendous skill to get the thing to boil at exactly the right amount, and not too much. And so you had this soap shredder, which was basically an emergency creature to be used only when there's danger of the thing boiling over. And it has an effect. It has the opposite effect on the surface tension of the bubbles that you would expect. Instead of it becoming a kind of frothy boiling mass, it quietens it down. So it does the opposite. So you would shred this soap, whole hard soap, into the still with the shredder. Now, what they didn't realize is that which one of you can tell me which other distilleries are in the same group as Glengarry?
Well, yeah, Ardmore, Lefroy.
No.
Auchentoshan.
No,
Bowmore.
all wrong.
Back.
Okay.
From back in those days.
Oh, back then.
They were owned by Morrison Bowmore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bowmore, yeah.
Distilleries. Glengarry, Auchentoshan, and Bowmore.
Yeah.
All owned by Morrison Bowmore. And if you go back to the bottlings between 1978 and 1988, they all taste of perfume. And what did they do? They bought a consignment of soap without realizing it was perfumed soap. This is so. Now you'll never get any of them to admit this, and you'll only find it in the most discreet forums. It's known as the soap problem. And I actually got one of them to admit to me that it was true, because I thought maybe this is just a kind of urban myth, but it actually is true, and that explains what I tasted. And the most extraordinary thing is how did they go on distilling it without tasting it? Because any stillman, if you go to Budgie, who's the most experienced stillman in Bruichladdich, for instance, tests when he's got to the midpoint by splashing it on his cheeks like an aftershave. He can smell it. He knows when it's right. And I just cannot see how it's possible for them to have distilled this for years without realizing there was something weird about it. But anyway, you can take it. You can either regard it as a myth or true, but I think it's true.
It sounds like it could be.
Glengarry has never recovered. That's why Glengarry was so cheap in the 1990s. It was ridiculously cheap. Nobody wanted it. It's a bit like, nobody would buy what's the blooming thing called? Lancia. Nobody would buy a Lancia because the engines fell out, because the engine mountings were too rusty, and the engines just fell out when you're going along a motorway. You suddenly lose your engine. The perfume problem is the same as that. So it damaged the brand so much that Glengarry was almost unsaleable for quite a long time.
Yeah, because they did close down, and then they relaunched with the unpeated.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And they got it all ready to have. They got it all ready in 2000 to have floor maltings again, but they ran it for 3 months with the floor maltings, and the accountants looked at the bottom line and they had such a panic attack that the thing was shut down, because it is extremely expensive doing floor malting. You've got 24-hour turning of the malt floors, and although they have a semi-automated system in Glengarry, well, it's not. I mean, you wouldn't actually call it automated, but it takes some of the back-breaking hard work out of the turning.
Going back to your bottled history book, Ian.
Yeah.
Talking about the working in the maltings, and for us fans of whiskey, it sounds like a romantic thing to do. It sounds like a fantastic thing to do. But some of the stories of the guys that used to work doing floor maltings, it was backbreaking. I mean, they almost dreaded it because it was such a hard job.
You know, there's a blend called Monkey Shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's the condition they got.
Yeah.
It was basically a fusion of their rotator collar around the top of their arms.
Up the shoulder, yeah. It caused that droop, didn't it? Yeah.
But it seems, you know, again, for us fans, it seems odd to think if anybody working in the distillery would actually dread going and doing a job. But these guys were almost dreading going to have to do it again, because it was another all the way. I mean, you see these malt floors, they're huge. And they were having to turn the whole lot, yeah.
I think if you go down to Springbank or something like that, and you see them doing it manually, you don't realise how important a shovel is to a distillery. Everything is shoveled.
One of the interesting things to me, wandering around looking at old equipment, was discovering all the apparatus they used between about 1955 and 1970 to turn the malt over. You know, before they suddenly realised that they could have a big malting and subcontract the malting to another company, Bears or another company to do the malting for them. They found ways of removing the physical labour from the malting process, and there are some extraordinary devices. If you go to this is where my memory's letting me down there. On the Keith Road, nearly in Rothes, on the road from Rothes to Keith.
Not the old coal burner.
No. That's too near Elgin. God, it'll come to me.
You've got Glen Talkers out that area.
Talkers.
Yeah.
Spot on. Talkers. At the entrance to Talkers site, there is a strange square building as you go into the site.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's right on the roadside, isn't it?
It's only connected with pipes to the main building. Mm-hmm. And if you go in there, you see the most extraordinary. It's in the book, actually. There's an extraordinary drum maltings, which is a kind of deep red colour. It looks like a gigantic washing machine, 20 feet wide. And all the barley went in there, and it did one cycle about every 10 hours. So it would do 3 cycles in a day and just keep the stuff turned over. And that was one solution. Tamdu had a thing that looked like a big trough, and there were bars that moved along and scooped the barley over the top. Every few hours, the bars would move right along the trough, very, very slowly. Yeah, that's Glentock.
There we go.
Yeah. And the most glorious one is in Speyburn. I mean, Speyburn has a set of Victorian, because Speyburn has, I don't know if you know Speyburn, but the site of the distillery is extremely small. When they built the distillery, they built it at the bottom of a valley, and there was no room for expansion, and certainly no room for warehouses or malt floors. So they had to think of a way that they could turn the malt in a very restricted space. And they installed the most amazing set of drum maltings in a row, which are also in the book somewhere. They're blue and white, and they're really very, very grand. And the contents of them, each one has a trap door. So they align it so the trap door comes round to the bottom every now and then. And when it's at the bottom, they open the trap door and all the malt falls out onto a conveyor belt and travels to the kilns to be dried. So it's a very sophisticated system, which was much, much older than anybody else's. Now, there are two distilleries up on Ben Rinnes. There's Ben Rinnes Distillery itself and Ben Romach. No, not Romach. What's the other one? Ben Rinnes and...
There's Glenallachie and there's
Ballyhewman.
Baltabane.
Glenfarclas?
No. It's actually there are 5 distilleries that drain from Ben Rinnes Mountain. Use the water supply, and it's the one that's further along. It's on the Granton end of the mountain. It's gone out of my head. It'll come back. Ben Rinnes is one of them, and they have Saladin maltings. Now the Saladin maltings are actually, it's impossible to knock them down because they've got listed status, and the Ben Rinnes one is the size of a cathedral. It has an amazing vaulted roof, and inside it there's a thing like a snowplow which goes back and forth and turns the malt over. And all of this was designed to reduce the amount of sheer hard physical labor that was required to keep the thing going. But of course, round about 1970, when the big maltings opened up, Baird's and their like, they closed down the Saladins because they were considered to be uneconomic. But they haven't taken them away. They're still there. And I think the biggest revelation to me wandering around trying to do bottled history book was finding places that are just walled off. They don't knock them down because it's too expensive to knock them down. I went to Macallan and we were wandering around looking at what was a basically really boring interior. And the woman who'd come with me, who was a PR consultant for Edrington, said, it's really boring, this place. You won't find much to photograph here. And I thought, she's absolutely right. And there was a young Stillman who was wandering with us. And he said, why don't you show him the old one? And she said, what old one? He said, the old distillery. He said, it's far more interesting than this one. He said, I can get the key. It's just over there. It's about 200 yards. So we walked over to all these old buildings and opened it up. And it was like one of these hit Gothic horror movies. Great creaky door. And inside, all covered with cobwebs and all sorts of things. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. The washbacks had been left full of water. But somebody, very astute person, thought at some point in the future we might need these washbacks again. So we'll keep them moist.
Keep them moist.
We'll keep them wet. If they dry out, they'll be useless. And the stills were covered with verdigris. And I thought, this is a photographer's dream. This is simply amazing place. And I took lots of pictures in there. And now, of course, shortly after I'd done this, now, whether it has any relation to me photographing it, probably not. But they decided to refurbish the old distillery completely. And if you go to a Macallan tour now, it's the old one that you get shown, not the new one. The new one is just a warehouse, basically. And they're far more interested. It's far more romantic looking at the old one. It looks so pretty.
I can show you a picture of that in a minute.
We've got Walter picking you up there, Ian. You mentioned the Speyburn being at the bottom of a valley, and he's picked you up saying it. Surely it's a glen, not a valley.
Aye, a glen. Thank you, Walter.
That's the old Macallan pushbacks there.
Oh, wow, yeah. Right, I'll have to point out David Muir. He's saying I have that. I assume we're going back to the monkey shoulder. David, I've seen the size of drams you pour. That is not monkey shoulder from Town and Malt. That is lifting your glasses. Giving you that. So, don't come at that and say you've had a hard work in the malt florins. Or maybe it's carrying all the bottles home from the shop he was when he was in the other day.
I think as we've said at the start of the show here, Ian, I mean, I've known you for such a long time. Absolutely wonderful friend, fascinating listening to you all the time. I've always been fascinated listening to you. But thinking about your photography journey, ending up within the distilleries. The first book that you developed, The Last Days of Bunty. Was that the beginning of your sort of book?
Bottled History was the first book.
Okay, so where did The Last Days of Bunty come in then?
That's a curious one, because I went in 2012. Two photographers decided they would set up a workshop venue in Wester Ross, near Alt Bay, and it's called Melon Charles. It's at the end of the peninsula near Alt Bay.
I've been there. I used to go on holiday to Melon Charles because it looks right onto the Isle of View, which is beautiful. Yeah.
And they bought, in fact, they bought a perfume studio, since we've already been talking about perfume, from an Irishman who'd been making soap. And the husband decided he would run a photographic training studio, while his wife would run the gift shop and do the cooking in the cafe and the restaurant and all the rest of it. And they've been there for 10 years, and they've now sold it. They are still there in the village, but they've sold it to somebody else. But the first outing of this training studio was in 2012, and there were 20 of us, and we were being taught by the two most famous landscape photographers in the UK, David Ward and Joe Cornish. Right. It would generally be regarded as the absolute creme de la creme of landscape photographers. And I got there, and the wife, the one who was running the cafe, said, "You're not really interested in all this landscape stuff, are you?" And I said, "No, not really. It doesn't turn me on. I love landscapes, but photographically, it's very difficult to take something that doesn't look like a J. Arthur Dixon postcard. You know, it's you have to have a real skill to do it." And she said, "I know what you need to photograph. You'd be far more interested in the contents of an old house." And she said, "If you wander back up the road just a mile, you'll find an old cottage up on a headland, and you can go in there and it's full of stuff. It's as if they just moved out." And I said, "Now you're talking. That's my kid."
Yeah.
And I went back there, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It really was. I mean, when I was a boy, we used to break into this house, which had been abandoned, and it was all full. Everything was in the cupboards, and it was even cereal in the cereal packets and things like that. It was really quite weird. And this one was like that. There was a soup plate on the table with a spoon still in the soup plate, as if somebody just finished it. And wow. There were books all scattered about. And I thought, my God, this is such a gift. And I had a small, very flexible camera with me. And I took about 2 hours, and I shot probably 50 photographs inside, I would think. Some of them were very spontaneous, because I was so consumed by it. I was just in another place completely. And I was imagining what it would be like to be in this cottage, to live in this cottage. And I got back with all these pictures, and I put them onto the screen. And my mentor, my tutor, David Ward, said, "Oh, I don't like these." I said, "Oh, no. I mean, look, there's no verticals. For God's sake, what were you dreaming of? They're all over the place." So you have to go back. You have to go back and shoot them all again.
I know. That seems to happen to you quite a lot, Ian.
It's almost like, I mean, the thing is that book in itself is like, because I know you took a lot of photographs of the old Cornhill Hospital, and I guess those are a lot of the ones that you sold through the hospital, and people were fascinated to see the demise of. Was it the old Cornhill Hospital? It wasn't King Seat, was it?
Both,
yeah. But it's that.
It took me 5 years to break into King Seat. And in the end, the managers in ARI said, "We don't know you're doing this. If anything happens to you, you're on your own, mate. If you fall through the floor."
I was just thinking it was easier to break out than to break in, for surely.
And I said I used to wander around this place at 3 a.m. to the wards. I know I could do it with my eyes shut. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't a problem. It was really interesting. is you find all sorts of things. You find remnants of the past, and this kind of way in which history continues is great interest to me, and it's very photographically, it's really interesting to me. So you can see the remnants of an old culture still. And I suppose that unites my various projects together, as they're all like that. And the Bunty's Cottage ended up as just a small book with a collection of these photographs and an imaginary story written by me of the old lady who lived in the cottage spending her last days before she dies.
And you could totally believe that story as well. And I'm pretty sure that actually by now you could probably tell the stories or invent stories about people working in distilleries.
Yes, indeed, you could. No, you could.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to imagine them, though. I mean, I wouldn't want to invent them. I
No.
think it's much better if you hear them from the horse's mouth, as you can find. The trouble is that the old guys who are really interesting are dying off very quickly. And they're a previous generation. If you go and interview the current staff, it would be really boring. I mean, I've got a picture in the back of the Ardmore, contrasting the people who worked there in 1890 with the people who worked there in 2011. And all the 2011 people have got high-vis jackets on, and they're not.
The guys will have their hats and the waistcoats and the pipes and the moustaches. And
no, exactly. There's no kind of there's no character to them, you know. So it would be difficult.
I mean, you know, we have bits of characters there. Unfortunately, a lot of them are tied to what they can and can't say. There's a lot of legalities in what they're allowed to put out, isn't there?
Yeah, they're terrified. Terrified of letting the cat out of the bag.
They're not allowed to be the characters that they are.
It's been really difficult. I mean, it's becoming so difficult to do that kind of spontaneous stuff. It's one of the reasons I've gone. My other 2 books, apart from the walking ones, I've done 2 books about Romania, and one of the great pleasures in Romania is they're completely unself-conscious. The people who work in the stills they just ignore me basically and let me get on with it. I mean, they're very friendly. They ply me with food and drink, but photographically, they're completely not fazed by me photographing them at all. And it allows me to get really spontaneous portraits of them, and the lighting and these. I mean, these are up in the north of Romania. The villages have stills, sometimes lots of stills. I know one village that's got 19 stills in it, and each still is owned by a family, and they rent it out to other families. So the families who've got basically fermented fruit pulp bring it down in a big trolley or a cask or something like that, a barrel full of fruit pulp, and they rent the still for a day and distill their fruit pulp. And what comes out is a 25% liquor called Tuica. But in Maramuresh, they then collect that and do a second distillation of the Tuica, and they produce their 50-60% Harinka, which tastes either of apple or pear or plum or whatever they happen to choose to put in it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Whatever's around is what they put in it. But you can tell the plum Harinka tastes like slivovitz, which they drink all over Eastern Europe. And there's an apple one, which is not unlike Poire William that you get in Brittany. And I found it fascinating because what you're seeing there is exactly what would have been here in 1820. So up in the Highlands, the family would have a still, and other people would use the still. They're just using different carbohydrate to ferment, but it's basically the same process. The stills come apart so you can hide them. The top comes off, the still comes off. In Romania, the parts are all stuck together with pastry. I mean, they make a pastry mix, which is and then roll it out thin and seal the joints in the stills with the pastry. And as the stills heat up, the pastry solidifies, and that keeps a really good steam to stop the steam escaping. And you get none of the stuff that's produced is never sold. It's all exchanged by barter. So you give somebody a bottle and get potatoes back in the other direction. or you know, it's what you as in Speyside before 1950. If you wanted an MOT done in Dafton, you'd give them a bottle of hooch out of the stills, bottle of claret in exchange for an MOT. Bit ironic, but anyway, there you are.
I'm hoping to reinvigorate that in Foggy. To be fair, I think it's maybe something we could do here. The story about your beginnings in Romania were about this. You won a Honda. You won a Honda.
I did. Yes, I did. When I was 19. Well, 20, I think, actually. I've said it's 19 on the book because it sounded more romantic, but anyway.
Yes, it does.
Yes. I discovered I could. I got this Honda 50 when I was up here, and decided I could take it on a train to Belgrade for some ludicrous sum, £13 or something. And when I got there, they couldn't find it and they'd lost it. And it turned out that the train had been decoupled in Munich, and the bike had been taken off and not put back in the right carriage. So anyway, when it turned up in Belgrade, they put it in a shed at the back of the station. But since I couldn't speak a word of Serbian and they couldn't speak a word of English, and it was a communist bureaucracy at the time, an impasse took place. So I went every day and said, "Where is my bike?" And there was always a great big woman in black at the end of each platform, sitting in a kiosk with her hands crossed, and she'd say, "Niet, niet." So I thought, I am going to spend my entire holiday in the pouring rain in this miserable dump. I hated that city. My God, I hated it. Anyway, eventually, I thought I'll go and I'll find the British Embassy. There must be some kind of embassy in the British Embassy. So I tracked this place down. And of course, it was full of what you'd imagine, public school Oxbridge types. And he said, "Oh, the Wallers will have taken it off and put it in some shed somewhere. Well, I guarantee I'll find it for you." It took them 20 minutes to locate it, and it was stuck in shed 19, where it had been for the whole week. So I got it out, and off I went. And it's about 50 kilometers, 30 miles to the Romanian border. And the contrast was phenomenal. I just crossed the border, and the customs guys went all over the bike. They were underneath it looking to see how it worked and all the rest of it. Not because they were trying to find anything, because they were fascinated. They'd never seen a Japanese bike before. It was just a source of amazing excitement to them. Wow. And they said, "Welcome to Romania. You'll have a lovely time here." And I did. I never forgot that. It was just an amazing place. So hospitable. And it's still like that now. It really is.
When you came to the shop, the first time that we managed to meet up again for such a long time, you came to the shop and gave me a sample of Bruichladdich, which is one of the casks that you've got. But you also gave me a sample of the Romanian whiskey from that chap, and it actually was incredible.
What he's doing, I mean, he's a spy basically. I know very little about him. He's very, very cagey about his background and all the rest of it. But he has worked for more than 20 distilleries here over a long, long time. And he's learned the absolute ins and outs of whiskey production. And he's actually set up as a consultant to develop new distilleries now. But he also owns a distillery in Romania, in Transylvania, which he's using to produce whiskey. And he's maturing the whiskey in Romanian wine barrels. There are a couple of wine species which are very difficult to get hold of in the UK. But the Romanians have been making wine for 300 years. It's some of the best wine in Europe. And he's maturing one of his whiskies in Feteasca Alba barrels. And that's what I gave you to taste. It's quite extraordinarily good.
Unbelievably good. It was fantastic. Yeah.
And I thought,
what kind of age are these whiskies?
3 years.
Just straight. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
It didn't taste like that at all. I mean, it was.
No.
I mean, some of the best young whiskies we've got, like Dalmunic and all this kind of stuff, that is, is very, very palatable. It was as good as that, if not slightly better.
He says he's going to bring. He says
Yeah.
he's going to send me some more when more comes. I don't know how he gets it. He must. I don't smuggle it in or something. I don't know where he gets it from. But
ask no questions, hear no lies.
Ian, Neil's just brought in a nice point there, and it's something I want to ask you as well. Is when is your cheese going to be commercially available? When can we buy some more of this cheese?
Oh, here we go.
So, for those who don't know, Ian popped into the shop. He's been making his own brie, which we had a sample of, and it paired it lovely with the little. Oh wow! There we go.
That's the next Stilton. That's the next Stilton.
That's a Stilton made on Monday. It'll be ready in about 3 months.
So we look forward to that.
What I'm doing. What I'm doing is having fun. That's all. It's been my lockdown project. And
Mike and I had a wonderful day in the shop when Andrew. Well, no, it was Chris actually. Chris from Little Brown Dog came in with the cognac, the Little Brown Dog cognac, the Petit Chien Brun. About half an hour after you'd left, having left me a slice of brie. So we decided we were going to have a glass of cognac with brie, and it was absolutely incredible.
Did it go?
Oh God, yes. I mean, oh bloody hell! It was incredible. The cognac. It's in these kind of bottles from Little Brown Dog, but the stuff's like Coca-Cola. It is so dark. It's wonderful. I was looking for mine there. I can't quite see it.
No, I don't have one either.
But with the brie,
I found it hidden in Alaki 12 though.
The brie was just amazing. My problem was I got home and my rescue dog from Spain, Posey, found the bag with the brie in it. So we need more because she loved it. She thought it was amazing.
A lot more smelly than a British brie that you buy here would normally be.
Oh, she was thinking, "Oh my God, this is like home."
Yeah. Oh, it was outstanding, David. Yeah, David, you didn't even need crackers. That cheese, you didn't even need crackers with that cheese. It went down.
Oh, just a lump of cheese
straight off the knife. Yeah.
I'm not
that cognac was.
I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but I took 2.
You should blow your own trumpet far more often, Ian.
I took 2 specimens to the gourmet cheese shop in Rosemount. A triple creme, French triple creme, and a light blue, also sort of French style. And she wrote me the most amazing email back saying, she gave me a detailed taste description of each and said, anytime you want to sell either of these in the shop, I will be absolutely delighted to have them. I thought,
Brilliant.
That's nice.
You'll have to give Patrick at the Kilton Frog a shout as well. I'm sure he would do something for you.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no intention of producing them commercially, but they will. What I'm doing is I'm handing them to selected individuals who can be part of my tasting panel, like you, Russell.
I think I was just lucky I was in the right place at the right time when you came in.
All I ask in return is that you write some kind of review of the cheese, that you give it no holds barred assessment of what it's like.
Absolutely.
Plaster it all over Facebook and Instagram, and we got that in. That was
brilliant.
Have you got a favourite cheese?
Is there such a thing?
Depends on what whiskey I'm drinking.
Is there such a thing as a favourite cheese?
Oh, yes.
I've got a cheese book, and I look through the book and I think, I like that, 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 I really like that, I really, really like that, I like that, I like that.
I don't have a least favourite cheese, put it that way.
I can tell you it's not difficult. It's not difficult to find people who want to be on tasting assessment panel. I mean, it's really.
I can imagine. I'm waiting for hands to go up on the chat here. I'm waiting for people to volunteer. But yeah, my cheese preference depends on the whiskey I'm drinking. I think if I'm drinking something from Islay, I'll probably go for a Roquefort or something a bit blue. If I'm drinking something a space out a classic bourbon or something, I'll go for a creamy Comte or something like that.
There's a cheese shop in London called Paxton and Whitfield, which is apparently I didn't know about it, but it's quite famous apparently. It's regarded as the absolute doyen of whiskey cheesemongers, and they do a podcast about once a month, and there are 28 podcasts you can listen to, and I have entertained myself while I've been walking listening to these podcasts. Now they've done one about pairings with port, and they've done one about pairings with wine, but they have not done one about pairings with whiskey, which definitely needs to happen, doesn't it?
We're in there. We're in. Yeah, we're
yes.
Absolutely in.
I mean, up D-side in Cambus-o-May, the cheese company in Cambus-o-May is making one with Ardmore in the cheese. I'm not quite sure how they're steeping it. They're steeping it in Ardmore or something like that.
It's a wonderful cheese, that one. Yeah, really nice.
Their cheese is quite good. We won't mention anybody else locally that cheese isn't good, but there are some that don't do it quite so well. But I mean, it's one of these things.
The one in Bank is just rubbish. But
David just mentioned there he has a spare bottle of the 12-year-old Glenallachie, but I've not quite finished it.
We've never got quite around to what's in your glass, Ian? We never quite.
What's in my
I think
glass?
It was a revival. Wasn't it Glenglass a revival? That's seen you pour, no?
What's in my glass is the end of the Glasser Pedro.
Oh,
yes.
Which I bought another. I managed to track down another bottle of it last week online.
So we've spoken about this a few times, and this whole idea of catching these older guys, the guys that are not around, they're not going to be around for much longer. Ian Banks wrote a wonderful book called Raw Spirit.
Called what?
Raw Spirit. It's.
I don't like that, Russell. I've got it.
You've got it.
Yeah.
Have you read it? Yeah.
He spends the whole bloody book going on about his car.
Well, yeah. There's a bit of that.
There's hardly anything in the book about whiskey.
I love Ian Banks, but the best thing about this book is that the first few chapters, he meets up with his friends, and his friends say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm going to some distilleries." And what, for a book? Yeah. And you're getting paid? Yeah. Do you need any help? Well, yeah, okay. So this question arises several times in the book. So the next project, or the next edition, or the follow-up to what I'm trying to say here is I'm happy to drive. Okay. You can go.
I'll take a mental note of that, Ian. I'll take a mental note of that. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll
he
need
said
holidays,
it here,
Mike.
Ian. You remember he said that he's happy to drive, always happy to drive.
Happy to drive. So long as Mike will give me holidays, then.
Well, I have to print the one I've got. The last walking book has to be printed and sold, and then I think I'm going to do one on cheese then.
Yeah.
So there's a long queue.
So I remember we used to meet a long time ago, and I mean, I'm probably one of the most nurses ever to have from such an esteemed person myself. I think I found myself very, very fortunate. But I remember when we spoke about, I once asked you about the photographs on the walls in your office. Yeah. And I said, "Oh, is that a hobby?" And you went, "No, that's what I do. I just happen to be a psychiatrist. But I see myself as a photographer."
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
And I've held on to that. I think that's a wonderful way of looking at things. Sometimes you end up working in a profession that is what you do, and it pays the bills, and you get to the end of it. But actually, underneath that, there's something else. Well, it's wonderful when that then comes out.
I'm a great one for the theory of 10,000 hours. That you're only really good at something you've spent 10,000 hours doing it. And I've only spent 10,000 hours doing two things. One was psychotherapy, and the others doing photography.
Yeah.
So those are the only things I would count myself as reasonably good at. Now somebody said,
you're building your hours for cheese.
Yeah, somebody said last week, how many hours of cheese have you done? I thought about 200.
Surely, if you're aging the Stilton for 3 months, that's a lot of hours. That classes as making cheese, surely.
maybe. I mean, what I would like to do sometime is show you some of the pictures from the various projects that I've done. Now, because I can't get access to this software for some bizarre reason, I can't do that tonight. But I got such a lot of pictures from the various projects. I mean, I did a commission for Brookladdy, and I did the academy at Brookladdy as well, which was the training academy that Jim McEwen ran. That was a week-long, total immersion in whiskey making, and it was fantastic. I loved it. And it doesn't exist anymore, regrettably. And I did a commission for Springbank for a week, and I did the Glenglassaugh project for 6 months to a year, and then I did a book with a retired hack from the Dundee Courier, which is called Scotch Mist. Do you know the book?
Oh yeah.
Spelled MISSED.
I don't know.
It's about all the clothes. We've got it at the shop. I was looking to see if I had it here, but I think it must be at the shop. I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's on my bedside cabinet. That's where it is.
Brian Thompson produced a first edition.
But back to the start of the conversation tonight, Ian. For me, and Mike is completely on board. I mean, Mike. It's probably one of the best bosses I've ever had, in the sense that very, very close as a friend, which is wonderful as a boss. Obviously, I respect him as a boss. That's what you've got to do. I've learned how to do that years and years and years in the health service. You've got to respect people that are your employer, but sometimes your mates, and that's great.
Just don't go into the Manuel and Mr. Faulty mode like you did last time you were here.
That's sometimes.
That's me and Russell now, Ian. We've taken on that.
But one of the things I wanted to do from the start was actually get yourself and your books and your stories on board, and we were keen to do a tasting before lockdown. We were keen to do a tasting. So I mean, I have a vision of an evening in the shop where we get you along with the photographs and the stories, and somebody like Robin Lang to maybe play a few tunes along to that as well at the same time, and have a wonderful evening in the shop.
Yeah, well, I love that. I'm game for that anytime you want.
Yeah, and I think our customers would absolutely love that as well. I think it'd be an astonishing evening.
Well,
yeah.
The other thing is I've got the recordings, the original recordings of the old men speaking. Now, for anybody that's grown up in this part of the world, they are really wonderful.
Powerful.
They're
very
difficult
powerful.
to understand.
Yeah.
They're broad. Well, I did a lot in Islay, so I've got various important people in Islay, but the bulk of them are probably from this part of the world. So some of them are in such broad Doric that nobody can understand without subtitles. I mean, I took this presentation all over the UK, and I did it in Elgin first, and everybody understood. Then I went to Aberdeen, where 75% understood. Then to Edinburgh, where 50% understood. I did one in Holyrood Castle with Mark Davidson from the Royal Mile, and that was an extraordinary event. But there were so many toffs and posh people there that didn't understand a word of Doric. And then I went to Lincoln and down to the southwest of Wiltshire, and I ended up in the Malt Whisky Society in Hatton Garden in central London. And they hadn't got a clue what these guys.
They needed a translator. Somebody behind you with the.
Absolutely. So it was interesting seeing what people could pull out of this. But listening to some of the old guys talking, telling their tales was just so funny. Amazing. Yeah. So I could do that as well, but if we do that, it'll have to be in a place where I can actually show the pictures.
Well, hopefully we can very soon. Hopefully we can do that in the shop.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
that would be good. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, because we have. I don't know what your historical knowledge of stone circles in the area are.
Oh, I've done a lot of stone circles.
So we have the range of our single cask stone circle range that we have.
Oh, do you?
The other ones have whiskey in them. This one's an empty. But so every year we launch them, and we have the Dunny Deer. We have our next launch is coming up next month. Is the Easter of Quirky.
Yeah.
We've done Sun Honey, the Maiden Stone. Technically not a circle, but it was our first one, so we had the Maiden. And the other one was the Balwine. So we could use that, incorporate that. I would like to do a tasting with those, and maybe do something like that. So
lovely.
That could be something to look at. Yeah.
There was a competition of stone circle photographs probably about more than 10 years ago now, which was exhibited in the town hall in the middle of Old Aberdeen. You know, the building that's right in the middle, beside the bars in the middle. And
yeah.
I made what has become a very good friend there. In fact, we went out last week for a curry, first decent curry I've had for 2 years. But I took lots of stone circle pictures for that, and some of them were really good, I think. There are so many more stone circles than anybody knows about. You just have to be prepared to go and look for them. And some of them are in the middle of plantations. They're hidden away in peculiar places. If they're so spectacular that some of them would have a visitor centre if they were in England. Whereas here, there isn't even a board. There's nothing.
I like that about it. I like it about it. You know, it's this hidden gem that you have to, you have to get out of the car and you have to walk a little bit to get to. Yeah.
No, I agree. No, I like it too. But there are some beautiful places. I mean, the one, what's it, Inverurie. She's just outside Tarland.
Oh God, yes.
Right, yeah.
Place. Absolutely stunning.
I used to cover Tarland. That was a wonderful place to work, actually. GP was an interesting guy, but I used to love going out there, and I used to love driving over and seeing the Queen's View and then going down.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, fabulous, absolutely fabulous.
Lovely bit of country.
And a lot of what I love about the stone circles is maybe not the circles themselves, but where they are and what you can see from them, why they're there. You know, was it a burial ground or was it a worshipping ground? You know, and all this kind of stuff. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and how they got there. How did blooming hell did they get these bloody stones halfway up a hill? And it's just absolutely incredible.
There was there's a TV program tracking how they've managed to track the Stonehenge stones to central Wales, and they got them. They think they got the stones on a barge from the Welsh coast up the Severn estuary, and then
across the Severn,
pulled them all the way to Salisbury Plain. She's phenomenal. Yeah. So where did the Callanish ones in? Some of them are so huge.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there's a chat for another day. I think stone circles and whiskey. we'll maybe sit at a stone circle and we'll do it. Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be a nice wee tasting, wouldn't it?
Absolutely fabulous. Yeah.
When I was courting my wife, who Russell knows quite well, we had a picnic in the middle of the Eastern Accorsi Circle. It was very, very romantic. It was actually. There was nobody there apart from us. And a bottle of champers and some appropriate accoutrements. No.
Yeah.
Don't do that anymore.
And Maggie is Maggie was one of these women from a very young age. I knew Maggie a long time ago. Always drank whiskey long before I drank whiskey.
Oh yes.
So that whole notion of women not drinking whiskey is ridiculous.
I'm interested to know if you know this. This red wine cask finisher Jura.
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
I've not tried many Juras. I want to go to Jura very soon. Well, once I get kicked off ILAP, which is a different story altogether. But Jura is something I want to visit.
This is a 1 litre bottling exclusive to Sainsbury's. And I'm really impressed with it. I think for the sort of sub £50 bracket, I think it stands out as being exceptionally good. But
I think Jura's one of those distilleries, and there are a few out there that the core range I don't think does the liquid justice. You know, we have Ardmore is another one, but if you get Ardmore or a Jura in an independent single cask, or are absolutely incredible. But what you pick off, like you say, the supermarket shelf, 20 quid, £25. You're like, it's not ideal. But go into the independent bottlers. Amazing.
Why do they punch so far below their weight then most of the time? I don't understand that. It's peculiar.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I've just rebranded as well.
Sometimes it's to do with the corporate owners having a particular profile that they want to export, and that's why some of these distilleries. I mean, when Billy Walker took over Ben Rio, he discovered that there were hundreds of smoky casks at the back of the warehouse, which Chivas, in their infinite wisdom, had decided were unsaleable. So that's where all the smoky Ben Rios came from.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous because he got it. They got the notion that East Coast isn't smoky, which of course is rubbish.
They just weren't what the distillery character was all about, was it? And that's I can't sell that. Just leave it in the back of the warehouse. Love it.
I mean, the riches at the back of the riches in the Glenglassaugh warehouses were phenomenal. I mean, some of when I went up there, when they were doing before they put the thing back into total operation again, we had a few meetings with famous journalists, whiskey journalists from all over the UK, and people who run like the Sukhinder Singh, who runs the big shop in London. Can't remember what it is. It's the most famous whiskey shop in London.
The Whisky Exchange.
Sorry? Yeah, Whisky Exchange.
Whisky Exchange, yeah.
He came, and there were all sorts of people up there, and we tried all these 35, 40, 45-year-old bottlings. God, I was blown away by how good they were. I mean, trouble is, I've never looked at Glenglassaugh in the same way ever since. All I want is a 40-year-old, and this kind of 15 is no good at all. Oh, no, rubbish. Just need a 40. And my pockets are not deep enough for such things. But whether I'll ever open, this was what Stuart Nickerson decided to give me at the end of the commission, this beautiful bottle. But whether I'll ever open it is another matter.
So what was your views on the ownership?
On what?
Your cask ownership. You're dabbling a wee bit of that just now.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Cask ownership.
What are my views on it?
Yes.
Well, having been given this cask by Bruichladdich, that is something I never envisaged owning a cask. And it's 15 years old in July. And I'm going to keep it another 5 years and then flog it.
Yeah.
I just got it gauged, actually. There are 198 litres of 62%.
It is a phenomenal whiskey. That is really nice. I appreciate really getting a sample of it, to be honest.
No, it's lovely. I mean, it's had a lot of Jim McEwan's input into choosing it. So I'm grateful to him for that.
I mean, I guess talking with Jim McEwan, that was the other thing. There's not many people, and I'll flog this again for you. I'm not sure how many copies you got left. I think it's worth flogging. But there's not many people who have got a book that have got a foreword by Jim McEwan, because Jim has forwarded this and promoted this, and I think that's fantastic.
It took me a lot of work forward from him, I'll tell you, Russ.
out with Jim.
He's very difficult to pin down.
Out with Jim and out with Billy, and maybe they don't actually equate, but in terms of the people that you've met in the industry, and you must have met some fantastic people, who would stand out? Who would stand out as some of the spectacular people that you've met?
Is at the top. Jim's at the top of the heap.
Yeah.
Frank McHardy.
But tell us why. Tell us why Jim's at the top of the heap.
Charisma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
steeps out of every pore. He's riveting, absolutely riveting. If you follow him around and watch how he operates, I mean, he captivates you.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you, Russell. I'm just gutted we didn't get you over to Isla in March for the Isla Academy, because
I didn't get March and I've been for October. That's a different story altogether.
but yeah, I mean, just you've witnessed him on Zoom. To witness him in the person is completely different. It's
no,
it does feel like a dying star on Zoom, which I find quite sad. I mean, I guess everybody's got to retire. Everybody's got to stop working at some point in time. But I feel for me, it's as if I'm a young guy going along to watch the Rolling Stones.
yeah,
and I've missed the best.
Has he retired though? Has he really? Do you think he has?
No, he hasn't.
Even if he has, and I know there's a quality. So there's a quality to. I mean, what Ian's doing is actually bringing out the quality of these older guys. Everybody's got quality in life, and sometimes the older people have got the best quality. So maybe we need to just suck what we can out of Jim. Before he goes and spends time. But he has to go and spend time with his family. It's it's really important to him as well. He's a family man and an Isla man.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I met a lot of people doing that book, and he stands out as being the one who was most impressive to me. And there are a lot of competitors actually. Frank McCarty, who designed the Glengyle, the new Glengyle distillery beside Springbank, and was the manager at Springbank, is another one who's absolutely obsessed with whiskey and is another very charismatic individual. Nice.
We got, like I say, we spent the time at the Springbank school, and Frank was our kind of chaperone, kind of does him a lot of the service, but he was there every week, every day for us to go and speak to. And we got a tour around Campbell, and his knowledge and his enthusiasm. What a guy. And I would put him up with Jim, with Billy Walker in terms of, he brought triple distillation to Scotland with the Hazelburn from his time at Bushmills and things like that.
Yeah, that's right. I never had much exposure to Billy Walker. I managed to pin him down for about an hour. That's the extent of my contact with him.
You've done well then.
He's a bit.
Billy doesn't like the limelight. He really does not like the limelight at all. No. And he's very much the chemist in the lab and doing what he have. So maybe Alistair's our next one of our next stars. I mean, we're looking at who are the next rising stars, and you've just got.
There's a guy who was in Lafroig and then went to Edrador and Pitlochry, and then went to consult over the establishment of the English Whisky Co. in Ipswich. Now, his name's gone out of my head. He's an ex-merchant Navy engineer, and he was another one with tremendous charisma, really interesting bloke. I'd have to look at. It's such a long time since I've had anything to do with him. I don't know who it. I've really lost his name. I mean, there are a lot of people who are very impressive, but just occasionally you meet somebody who really stands out, and it unfortunately tends to be the older ones who stand out, not the younger ones. There are a handful. Malcolm Waring is really, really good value, but will he ever become a Jim McEwen? I doubt it.
I think somebody maybe like Ian Fortieth that Angus Dundee is somebody who has that charisma and that enthusiasm. You've got Kelsey McKechnie, I think, is work understudy, and David Stewart at Balvenie. So there are people there.
And you've got people like Michael Hendry. Michael Hendry at Loch Lomond is a fascinating guy, as is Ian McAllister, obviously, Glen Scotia. So
is Alan Winchester still there? Below?
I don't know, Mike.
he's the expert in the history of distilleries. He's a real walking encyclopedia of distillery history.
Okay.
I think he's probably retired. I don't know. I'm not sure. And then on top of that, you get the kind of larger than life, slightly mad ones as well. And there are quite a lot of them. Raymond Armstrong, Bladnoch, who was a builder from Belfast. He was an amazing bloke. I mean, he was hospitality personified, extraordinary. And he's gone back to Belfast, I think, to retire and sold the
I think somebody you'd have to have that you probably have already would be Kenny Glengarry, Digger Grant.
Kenny Grant was a funny example because he was so modest. He said,
"Yeah,
they're sort of." I said, "Who's the manager here?" He said, "Well, I don't know really. It's not. There isn't one." I said, "Is it you?" He said, "No." But he's become the manager sort of by
default. Yeah,
he's just got there somehow.
Yeah.
You just do your job and you get on with it. Yeah, fantastic.
He is, but he's so much. But we had a tasting at the last the rare fight, the rare fair that they have up there. We did a cocktail taste, a whiskey tasting, and he just sat and spoke to you, and you were great. You need your translator for sure to figure out what he's saying.
Yeah.
But when there's no camera, he hates cameras. He hates the publicity. He probably would never come on a Blether like this because he just doesn't like that kind of thing. But get him on a 1-to-1. The story you're talking about characters. I would certainly put him up there as an old school kind of character.
Dennis Malcolm, who probably has retired. He went from Ben Rinnes to Glen Grant. And I thought he was at retirement point when he was in Ben Rinnes, but he decided to take on Glen Grant, and he may well still be there. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know really. There was also an extraordinary man who was the manager in Dalmore, who had worked his way up from a warehouseman from the floor and ended up as the manager. And he retired, and he was dead in 6 months. I mean, the distillery was his life. It had been absolutely everything to him, and he clearly couldn't live without it. I mean, all these people I've credited at the back of the bottle history book, so all the people who helped me are in there. But it's funny because you do a book like that and you go back, if I went back now, that was 2009. So if I went back 12 years later, half the people I interviewed.
The thing about this book, it is a coffee table. It's a coffee table, but it's not only a coffee table book. It's a historical book. It's one of these ones you want to read and look at, and that's what I'm saying.
Half the places I photographed have either been changed or demolished, and half the people I interviewed have probably retired or died. So in the space of 12 years, everything changes completely. It's one of the reasons I like doing these books, because it cements something in time. It gives you a portrait of what it was like.
Yeah, you're capturing that history, aren't you? Yeah.
Look at the vaulting floor. I mean, look at that. That is a stunning photograph.
That, I think, is Bowmore, if I remember rightly. I think it's Bowmore.
Yeah,
there aren't many full-size malt floors there. But...
you can feel yourself just touching that and feeling it and standing on it and smelling it.
You see that's what you can never replace is the smell of a malt floor. If you go into Springbank, which is undoubtedly still one of my favourite products and tastes, and it's the same in Kilholman. You can smell the malt.
You talk about Kilholman.
Here comes the combine harvester. Here comes the harvester.
So Auntie Allegro is an absolutely beautiful. She's a wonderful girl. Such a lovely, lovely person, and she's so beautiful. She is the global brand ambassador, Italian girl. She's only been there about a year and a half.
What's her name?
Auntie Allegro.
Oh, Allegro.
Auntie Allegro. She's done a fantastic job. So Facial is next week. I think they've got their day on the Thursday the 3rd. but I am desperate to get myself on the seat of the combine harvester. That is that's emblazoned by Kilhoman, and hopefully at some point, Auntie will realise that my passion is about the combine harvester more than anything.
He doesn't even want to drive it. He just wants to sit on it.
I just want to sit on it. I just actually want to even touch it.
No, just watch
Kilhoman is fantastic.
Just watch the testosterone. Just watch the
Absolutely brilliant.
testosterone levels, Russell.
Yeah.
Testosterone. warning. Yeah.
Well, listen, guys. I think that's us at kind of 40 minutes over our
Yes.
It's not an allocated time, but we'll be trying to stick to an hour. It's Ian. We could do 10 of these and still not scratch the surface. So let's pencil in another 9 at least.
Yeah,
we'll try and get something going. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well,
really interesting to listen to you.
Very nice to talk to people who are so interested. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys. Sorry for taking up almost an extra hour of your time. Hopefully you've stuck around. I'll be fair, we just stuck around because Neil at the Whisky Trials, he only joined us at 3 minutes past 8, so I thought we better make it worth his while jumping in. So we had a chat for long. But can't wait to taste that Stilton. Absolutely fantastic. Russell, we'll maybe see you the weekend.
Saturday, we're back on Saturday. Yeah.
And have a great weekend, guys. Go ahead and enjoy the sun because it's still here and it's meant to be here for the weekend. Yay.
Yep, it is.
Thanks very much. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Walter, David, Duncan, Neil, all you guys for jumping on and listening to our Blethers. Sometimes we do go off on tangents and Blether absolute crap, but it's fun, so we do it anyway. Thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Yep, take care, guys. Yep.